Okay. That is not to say that they aren't found in other approaches or in other programs, but that's where they are from. But it will be much closer tied to units of study in phonics instruction, which means that for our time together, it'll be much more focused on those methods with primary students in kindergarten and grades 1 and grades 2. Grades 3, 4, 5, if you are a teacher who is supportive or focused on there, you can take these methods. There is not a resource to go along with them. I'm going to mute myself for a minute and turn my camera off and give everyone a sound talking to that it's time to calm down. I will not even be a minute. Okay, sorry about that. And all right. So if that doesn't feel like something that is for you right now, click off, go to a session that will better meet your needs, and I will not be even a little bit offended. I promise. I won't trash talk you behind your back or anything like that. Okay. So we'll go ahead and get started on that. And like the last time we were together, I am going to use my document camera and kind of build the ideas alongside of you, mainly because I've said this before and I'll continue to say it. I tend to talk way too fast when I present, and when I am nervous, I talk even faster. So when I build alongside of my presentation, I at least slow down enough that I make some sense to myself and allow myself to take a breath. So here we go. So one thing that I want to just start with is this idea of how word study, the study of and teaching of English language literacy and the system that supports it, is a component of our whole literacy day. And inside of it, phonological awareness, phonics work, letter formation work, vocabulary work, as well as when you move into the higher grades or further up the progression, it starts to teach into vocabularies and grammar. And that component holds that content. And one thing that every word study guru out there agrees on is that this, while it is a component and an absolute defined and important part of the day, it is best taught when that component relies on and interacts with other components of the day, right? So while I might teach in my word study time how the short vowel principle works, I'm going to be teaching or introducing it there. And I'm doing it in isolation and in the system in which it unpacks, right? While I'm introducing and teaching it there, I, as a teacher, also rely on those methods that are found in other parts of the day to support kids with the learning of it. So let's think about that. So there are times where, as a word study teacher, I might be teaching children about a principle about how when you're reading or when you're looking across words and you see a letter, one thing you can rely on is if it is a consonant and then a vowel and then a consonant, that vowel in the middle probably says the short sound, makes the short sound that vowel makes. And so I might teach that to children in my word study time. And during that teaching, it might be that in order for kids to practice it or employ it during word study, I give them something that we do together in shared reading, right? So during that practice time, in my word study time. The way that I teach it might be with a shared reading method, with a controlled text that I've unpacked for them. So I might put my little version of the controlled text and I might say, let's read through it. And every time our eyes see a consonant, a vowel, a consonant, let's stop and let's work our way across those three sounds. Let's double check to make sure that the sound in the middle says the short sound. And then if it does, we'll give it a thumbs up and we'll say the whole word and we'll move on. Does that sound okay to you? Because I want to make sure that before I dive into methods that we use in word study teaching, especially when we are using units of study in phonics as our primary resource, we are saying, yep, I am making space for word study instruction to happen. That means during my day, I have found a nice solid chunk of time that is word study focused, right? And during that time, because what I know, or what researchers and experts have told me, those experts inside of word study, is that when I'm teaching something in isolation, like I am going to be teaching or introducing phonics in isolation, I want to be able to rely on and return to familiar methods, activities, experiences that my students may have in other parts of the day, so that what we do in isolation is engaging, is interesting, is focus, carries that with it. And so because of that, what we think about is that when we're teaching phonics methods, we say, what are some of those methods that are valuable to our students? And there are lots of them that are valuable and valid. The ones we're going to talk about right now together today, there are about 6 of them. And the first one is the most controversial of all, so I'll get it out of the way first. It's traditionally called guess the covered word, and I would imagine that when you do this with your kids, you will probably replace the word guess with the word solve the covered word, or you could say like decode the cover word, something that replaces that word guess, because the word guess is really combative right now in the world of early literacy, because they're saying you don't guess. Of course you don't guess. Even those diehard people that would say, oh, I love playing guess the covered word, they never meant guess. They meant really and truly use some sources of information to get to the words, including visual. That said, traditionally it's known as guess the covered word, but we will probably speak of it as like solve the covered word, because in phonics instruction, there will be times where, in order for children to be practicing or understanding that letters operate separately and operate together, we, the teachers, are going to need to do some manipulating of words so that we can draw readers' eyes to focused parts of a text. So I might take words and I might mask or cover a part of that word so as to direct or force the learner's eyes to study and decode what is still seeable. I don't know if that's the right word, what is still, there for them. And so it might be that when I'm teaching word study and I am working to, help kids to notice that there are words that have an initial consonant, I might mask the rest of the word, not because I want anyone to guess this, but I want them to use initial sound or initial consonant to get ready to say, oh, let me solve what this word could be by seeing the first letter, identifying the first letter, recalling the sound that that first letter makes, producing the sound that that first letter makes, right? And I'm doing all of that work using a method of guessing the covered word, or like I said before, we'll call it solving the covered word. In the same vein, I might do solving the covered word, but when my kids are moving from letter to part work, right? So when my kids start to study blends, or when they start to study digraph, I might say, oh, let's solve this word, or solve the covered word by encouraging, or actually like forcing kids. I take away access to the entire word, but so I can force kids to see a part of that word and then move, or as I uncover the rest of the word, we're working to solve it using part by part or letter by part. But solving the covered word, or traditionally known as guessing the covered word, is a method that is used often in word study, instruction, and practice. Because what it does, it does many things, but one thing it does is it kind of levels it out, so all of the learner's eyes are looking at parts or pieces of the word. We are mindful and thoughtful to how we cover words, and we generally, when we're working with emergent and early learners in phonics, it is always left to right. So you always have access to the left part of the word, and as you work your way across the right, so as you're decoding that letter or part, you work across. You do not find inside of solving the covered word or guessing the covered word, you will not find an example of where, in early learning, where if I were to be having children practice solving the covered words, I would have something like this done. Let me do a quick little example where I would say, okay, let's solve it. You've got the end of it first, right? Because then I'm teaching kids how to skip around. I don't want you skipping around when you're learning how to solve words as the early stages of your reading or literacy progression. I want you practicing again and again, that mapping, that left to right, seeing the biggest letter or the biggest part that you can, and then attaching that next part. Now listen, when children move up that progression, when they have a solid sense of letter, part, and pattern, of course we manipulate words in different places, because then we can start thinking about using it not only as decoding, but encoding, right? How am I thinking about the inside of that word? If I want to write the word raining, I know that long vowel principle has some different features that do it. What one way it could go, or another way it could go. But again, that is not aligned with early phonics. It is aligned more with further along that progression. So solving the covered word, when I use units of study as a primary resource, I will find that there are lots of times where that is a method that kids are going to be practicing with. And it's important to keep that in mind. We think too about another method of instruction that is used inside of phonics, and that is the method of sorting. Hold on. That is the method of sorting. So I don't know about you, but whenever I think about sorting, I think of words their way. That is kind of like, oh, there's the sort. I know how to sort. And inside of phonics methods, that work of sorting is so powerful and so important if and when the routine of sorting goes along with the act of sorting. So let me give a scenario to you and see if this is Something that is, if you were to think about your own classroom or your kids when they were sorting, if you've seen. So a lot of times, and I taught words their way for so many years as my word study program, and my kids would get their sort, and during the sort, it would sound kind of quiet. It would be quiet, like the kids were doing the sorts, but I couldn't hear that production going on. The kids saying the words, hearing the words, agreeing on the words, communicating the words. It was a silent activity. And the truth is, a word sort, not just in early literacy, but across literacy. When we sort, we need to see the word, say the word, hear the word, check with someone else that they are hearing the word as we sort. Sorting is a powerful method when we are teaching phonics because it gives kids the opportunity to put all the parts of phonics together. The seeing or the imprinting of the symbols, the hearing of the sounds, and then usually when you're sorting with a partner, with somebody who you are producing with. And so then you can have that check-in, and not only with how the word or what you're saying sounds like, but then also the decisions you're making as a sorter when you're putting them into those columns. And so sorts are really beneficial inside of phonics methods when the oral production goes along with it. If you are going to have kids sort and you allow silent sorting, don't bother. Don't bother. Don't waste their time and don't waste your time, because it is, quite frankly, not beneficial to anyone because of how many principles in English language phonics there are. Once children move past short vowel principle, that short vowel principle, English language works in various ways. And unless we are not only seeing it, but saying it, we don't get enough practice with understanding how the features work or how the principle works. So we have to not only see it, but say it. And so, you want to make sure that when you are doing sorts with kids, that oral production is also there. When I'm teaching phonics and kids are sorting, I am almost always fluttering around group to group and making them talk. Right? Like it's kind of the opposite of what I am in other parts of the day where I'm like, stop talking. We're in the hallway. Stop talking. We're going to music. Please stop talking. I'm trying, and I'm like, no, more talking, more production, because I am, as the facilitator of that word study time, I am making sure that I am centering the child in all parts of phonics instruction, and that is the sound and the sight of the words. So sorting is a typical method that you will find in phonics instruction, and when you're using phonics units of study, you will find it often. And those sorts go all the way from concept sort to morpheme or vocabulary sorts as you move through the units of study. And on both ends, the oral work that the kids do in addition to the visual work of seeing it matters. Okay, so those are a couple of methods that are included in phonics instruction. Let's talk about a couple of more. Another one is that idea of making words. So much like I think of Donald Bear and Words Their Way, when I think of sorts, I think of Pat Cunningham and her pioneering work in making words from her 4 blocks work. And, the inside of teaching children about phonics, the jobs that they do, are the work that they do in making, or sometimes it's called making and breaking words, is a method that we rely on as phonics teachers, and and getting kids to practice that, where kids will have either word or letter tiles, or letter tiles and parts or patterns of words that they build together and break apart, so that they can do that complicated and important work of seeing how letter and part go together, how part and part go together, how letter, part, letter goes together. But the idea that we can take words and we can make them and break them using letters, parts, patterns, syllables, right? That's what making words is all about. And while traditionally I think about making words with letter tiles, like I remember having the little fishing tackle box with all the little drawers in it, and I had all my A's in one and my B's in the other and my C's in the third. you know in my phonics instruction, I probably have those individual letters, and I have some parts and some patterns for kids to make and break words as well. And there are lots of sessions in those units of study that rely on getting kids to make words. Often it will be with magnetic letters, or, letter tiles or word tiles. Sometimes it might suggest, I'm going to put this little thing right here. Sometimes it suggests that you use word or word part tiles. Sometimes it will say, like, get Unifix cubes and write a letter on one and different parts, or different phonograms on the other. Another way that kids, or another tool that kids might use for making words, are those magnetic letters and boards to make words and to break words, and as well as like whiteboards and markers. Like, look at all those different materials that are used to do that work of, or that method of making words in phonics. And any of those tools can be used all of the time. We've found that it's better if you have access to those different kinds of materials, that you use those different kinds of materials. As big of a pain as it is, I know, I get it. I get that I can store letter tiles one way, but my magnetic letters and boards have to be stored another way, and my whiteboards and markers need to be stored a different way, and my Unifix cubes need to be stored a different way. That said, it's more beneficial for the child because they're doing that making and breaking of words in transferable ways with different tools, so that they are starting to develop the principal concept, not the activity concept, right? Whereas like with sorts, usually a sort is a sort is a sort. I get my sort, I put my sort together, I look at my columns, I've got my outlier, and it's done. Solving the covered word is usually done in in context, right? So in a poem, or on some kind of predictable type of reading or controlled text. Whereas making words uses these different types of tools. And when my teacher is willing to be a little inconvenienced in making sure that I have opportunities to use those different tools, I am all the better for it as in my literacy learning, because I get multiple and different ways to do that work. Okay, so those are a few. Where am I on time? Oh my gosh, time goes fast. Those are 3 of the methods of phonics instruction that are highly relied on inside of units of study teaching. And I will tell you, those are 3 methods of instruction that are relied on in other approaches to teaching phonics and word study too. The difference is, whereas the units of study, I might turn to like session 5 and it's a sort session. And then when I turn to session 6, it's a making word session. And when I turn to session 7, it's not a session that goes with my phonics, but it goes with my sight vocabulary. As the teacher, I'm like, oh my goodness, this goes back and forth. Whereas when I'm teaching, month by month or F&P, they tend to organize it so like in several days in a row, the kids will be doing this kind of method, or they'll be doing this kind of method. There's not a right or a wrong, a yes or a no, a better or a worse to it. It's how the curriculums were bundled. And so you just want to get comfortable with that. as I mentioned before, if and when I'm doing a program like Words Their Way, here's what I'm relying on mostly. When I'm doing 4 blocks, it's not that I only do this, but I mostly am a maker and breaker of words. Even when I'm doing activities like rounding up the rhyme, that's a version of making words. Even when I'm doing what is that one that Pat does with like where you get like oh, like the different name brand things, right? And then they manipulate them that way. It's the same thing. All right, I'm going to stop here for a second and see if you have any questions or conversations that you want to have before I share the other 3 methods that are often found inside of word study practice. So I'm going to give wait time. Zip my lips. Yep, 4 blocks is still around. Me too. It is not often used. It's not often used as the curriculum. It is often used as a supplement. So, one thing that's pretty common in word study practices is when programs are not adopted. And I've lived here long enough to realize there are lots of places where word study programs have not been like formally adopted. People will kind of pull and choose from different approaches that they know or that they've had before. And so that's often how 4 blocks is used now is I'll go in and I'll see, oh, I know rounding up the rhymes. I know, rainbow writing. I know that. And we are trying to supplement something, right? We're trying to say, oh, here's what I know. So I'll do that work. That said, 4 blocks is still around. I think it was recently, I don't think it was a full on republished version of it, but I do think it was revised and updated. Anything else you want to ask? Okay, so I stopped at after those first 3 methods because generally, whether I'm new to teaching or I have been teaching for a while, those 3 methods are kind of, what's the right word? They're easy to identify, right? Like if I were to walk into a classroom and saw kids doing it, I'd be like, oh, they're sorting, or oh, they're solving the covered word. They're making words or breaking words. The next 3 methods that I want to share with you are less easy to identify if I were to walk into a classroom. That said, they are still methods of instruction that we will find often, or will rely on often as in our phonics instruction or in our word study instruction. And so the next method I want to share with you is a method that's called interactive editing. Now, a lot of times when I think of that word interactive and I say, oh, I know interactive writing-ish, or, I've watched interactive writing, but interactive editing is a version of that where, with the learning of phonics, when you're learning phonics, the goal is that you learn and employ phonics both to decode and encode, right? So we want reciprocation on both of those things for our phonics learners. And so in order to give kids opportunity to practice that, we'll say, let's use methods like interactive editing, where the children might during their practice time, they might receive a text, a created text that has purposeful, controlled errors on it that go along with the principle that they are learning about, or the features that they are focused on in their word study. And their job during practice time is not to correct the errors, right? That's no different than like daily 5 or whatever you want to call it, but to interact act along with each other, so with their partner or with their club and with their teacher, to interact and name not only what the errors are, but why the errors need fixed, how the principle works, what are possibilities for the features that could be used. And it's that idea of interactive editing. So the method is that children receive text that has controlled and purposeful errors on it that go along with wherever they are in the phonics progression, and then together with their teacher, together with their rug club or their word study partner, they're interactively editing it, not crossing out and writing correctly above it only, but circling, showing other ways it could go, deciding which way it probably is based on where the error is happening in the syllable of the word or in the place of the word. So it's interactive editing, and it's employed quite a bit in those units of study where the teacher will print or make copies of a controlled text. They usually go along with whoever the mascot is, right? So if you're teaching kindergarten, the little mascot is Mabel. So there are little books that Mabel has made, or little books about Mabel, and they will have like the wrong vowel represented in the inside of CVC words. And the children go through during their partnership time or their club time, and they're on the lookout to see what does it say, what sound can we isolate and hear in the middle of the word, what letter probably makes that sound, and correct it that way, right? That's interactive editing. It's used quite often in phonics instruction, as is this next method. And my coffee just dripped on my post-it, and it's ruining my life, just so you know. I don't know if I'm going to recover from it, but it is interactive writing, right? And hopefully now you're saying, oh, I can understand how this might be a little more difficult to kind of identify, right? Because interactive writing and interactive editing, they're not opposites. They're not different things. They are, two sides of the same coin, because first and foremost, they both are operating in the realm of interaction. Interaction means lots of conversation, lots of co-decision making, lots of work where it's not one person doing all the work, but either the partnership or the teacher with the students, but that interaction work. So in interactive writing, just like I might say, okay, over the next 2 weeks in my first grade classroom, I'm going to be doing some interactive writing to support kids in writing workshop with how to write a small moment story. I don't know if you've ever done that. I used to do it all the time in my classroom, where we'd take 5-10 minutes a day and we'd write a small moment class story interactively. I'd have the big sheets of chart paper, and there'd be 3 pages. I'd put them out on the chalkboard, and I'd have a basic sketch on each one, and the kids would practice telling the story of when we hatched our chicks, or when we walked to the computer lab and the 5th grade class was there, or when we had the fire drill and Haley tied her shoelaces together, whatever it was, whatever had happened recently that week. I'd say, oh, let's tell a story. And we'd practice work like beginning, middle, end. We'd practice work like saying full sentences, right? And then interactively, we would write them, where I'd hold the pen sometimes, and the kids had their little whiteboards and markers. And then other times I'd share the pen with the kids, and they would, practice it. So interactive writing is a method that we use quite a bit in phonics instruction, again, to support kids with the encoding of words, that the ability to say, oh, when I'm saying a word like, let me, 50, right? We want to write the word 50. Let's think about how could we spell it using all we know about phonics. Well, one thing we know is we have to see how many syllables there are in it, right? So 50, so we'll clap them out. Now we want to think about where are the 2 syllables? Where do the syllables start and stop? So let's say each syllable, 15. T. Let's say fifth T. Oh, now let's think about it. Are there any of those syllables that we could say, oh, I think I know how that syllable works, right? What type of syllable it is? Fifth T, fifth. It's a CVC syllable. So now I can take that CVC syllable type and I can say fifth. I can get to fifth, right? And the kids will have whiteboards and markers while they're doing that work. And they might be doing things like when they syllabicate it, they're writing two lines for the syllables, or they might do fifth and then a slash and then T at the end. And then when they're getting to the fifth, they're thinking about the three sounds that they hear inside of fifth, and they might be writing CVC underneath it and then saying, oh, making sure they're doing the F, the I, the F, or fifth, right? They're doing that kind of work while the teacher then is also doing that work on the board in a big way. She's having them turn their boards towards her. Oh, I get it. We're just working on the fifth and 50 right now. That T is going to be tricky, right? But like we're doing that kind of work. And then there are times where the teacher's saying, Sheldon, come up. Add yours to what we've done. But it's that interactive writing time. And it's a powerful method of phonics instruction, because what it does is we can, as the teachers, kind of fine tune it to whatever big focus or purposeful practice we want the kids to zoom in on or zone in on. And it might be that I want them just zoning in on one part of phonics instruction, so syllabication of it. So we might only be interactive on the syllabicating of it, right? Or it might be on the syllable type that the kids are learning, or it might be on the vowel teams, right, inside of the word that we're doing. But that interactive writing is a method that we use often in word study or phonics instruction, because the teachers we have some parameters we can control and layer in. So it might be multi-layered, where I'm working on syllabication and syllable type and hearing the sounds, or it might be lesser layered, where I'm just working on one of those things. But interactive writing, because everyone has their own set of tools, they have their own whiteboards and markers. And I also am working on a public or a class whiteboard and marker, or some chalkboard or overhead something, or smartboard. Everybody is interactive during that time, right? And I'm just sharing the pen at points of need. And then the last method that I want to share with you and talk just a little bit about inside of teaching phonics is the method of shared reading. I try really hard not to have favorites, but shared reading is probably my favorite method of instruction with little children, because one, it is so natural, right? Like it is a natural method of reading with kids, my voice, their voice, taking time to linger over parts and laugh over parts and inquire over parts. So, I can't emphasize enough like how much I love shared reading. I might get a tattoo that says shared reading on my body somewhere. That would maybe be the first of its kind. I bet I could enter and win a contest. I had like a heart that said shared reading in the middle instead of mom. I don't know. Anyway, so the method of shared reading inside of phonics instruction is one that is relied on again and again. And that is not that anything can be a shared reading book in phonics, but that we often will take shared reading and we will do a type of controlled text inside of shared reading. Now, controlled means it is not necessarily the same as decodable text, but decodable text is a type of controlled text. What it means is the type of text that I'm using has enough of the principle that my kids are learning or the feature that they are employing to practice the principle, that inside of my shared reading time, they will get repeated practice seeing, hearing, saying, writing that principle or that feature. So while I use shared reading as a method, like with some leveled texts, right? Like this is just a little early leveled text that has enough CVC words that follow the principle, right, in it. I can use that level of text. More often than not, if I do shared reading in phonics, I am using a controlled text that is created. So in again, in the units of study books, there are created shared reading texts that you can print and use, or I am using decodable texts that align and match up with where my students are in their phonics progression. So if we are in long vowel principle and my children are learning about CVCE, then I'm choosing decodable texts, and shared reading is the method that I'm using inside of my phonics time to support them in practice or employment of seeing that word, so working their way through it, mapping their way through it, understanding naming the principle or the feature, talking about that principle or feature, and then employing it or practicing it both as a reader and even as a writer. So a lot of times in my phonics methods, when I'm doing shared reading, I'll have whatever text I want the kids to use, and then I'll often have the kids partnered, also with a whiteboard and marker, so as when we get to that work, we can pull words out of the book and do a little encoding of them, do a little study of them, a little collecting of them, a little, we might even during using shared reading, and as we collect all the words, we might go through and see what are all the words that have the principle, right? So I had win, I had big, I had dog, I had one. Those are all CVC, right? And then, I might have the kids even like do a little writing of those words and doing that. Although this one, is probably not great. The others will be just fine, right? Because one, it says a weird sound in the middle. So those are typical methods that are employed during phonics instruction. I think that, if it were me, and I was heading into summer and thinking about my new year ahead, and I know I'm, what are the resources I have, or what's the program that I am working to or from, I might dive into that program or those resources on the lookout for when are these methods practiced, and think about how am I going to make sure that the students are getting those practices, getting that variety of practices. Or I might look through my resources to see, are there any places where if I don't see those kinds of methods employed or practiced, could I do something to support them, knowing the benefits of those methods inside of word study instruction. So, all right, it's time. It was a lovely day. I'm so glad you invited me to be a part of it. Please tell Jen and Krista, I said thanks. I hope you got something good out of our session. And I also hope that if you have any questions, you email me. I'm at craftedliteracycollective@gmail.com. And I always love to talk about anything literacy. All right. Okay. Take care. My pleasure. Thank you. See ya. Have a great summer. Congratulations. Thanks, Holly, for all your help. Bye-bye, Kayla. Bye.